Welcome everyone to today's ITS Davis weekly seminar. I'm very pleased to introduce today's speaker, Professor Scott Moura from UC Berkeley. I have heard several talks by Scott, and I'm confident that this is something that all of us at Davis would share some interest to a certain level. And Professor Moura is also a new director of the PATH program. Congratulations for that leadership. We need more young people taking this kind of leadership in the engineering field. And then without further ado, Scott, it's all yours. And if you can share, in addition to this, some of your visions that will push the research community that's being brought together in the couple of the transportation and power systems, that would be awesome. Thank you so much. Let's welcome Professor Moura.
Thanks, everyone. It's good to be here. It's good to see so many students in the room. And yeah, thank you, UAUA, for inviting me, and for ITS Davis for hosting. I very much feel at home. It's being here. It's just a pleasure to spend time with you all because we have such shared interests. So I'm going to talk a lot about transportation electrification and infrastructure. But before I do that, let me just introduce my own research lab called the Energy Controls and Applications Lab. Methodologically, we focus in dynamical systems control, optimization. Now data science is kind of covering all of these topics. And I describe it as working in a telescoping set of applications, from batteries, like models and algorithms for batteries, up to vehicles that are connected, automated, and electrified, importantly. And actually, that third area, now has kind of evolved towards infrastructure, combining transportation infrastructure and the power grid into these flexible resources. The most important product we make out of our lab, though, is people. It's the students, right? You all. And so here's my group currently. And, given that people is our product, here are all alumni. So I'll let you just look at the slide and enjoy. You can see who they are, where they have gone off to, just to get an idea of the flavor. And I'm quite proud of them because, they are going off making multiplicative impact in their various areas, be it in industry, academia, or in government agencies, in a way that's genuine to them. So that's really the most important thing is students and people who, the diaspora of people that are coming out of ECAL and LPAT. So let me just mention a couple projects I won't discuss in detail because my research program has grown quite vast and I could talk about a lot of things. But I want to give you a sense of the breadth, and then we'll dive deep into some topics. So this project is sponsored by SlrpEV, the Advanced Research Projects Agency in Energy. And I bring it up because the goal is very relevant to our discussion. It's to reduce energy in vehicles by 30% by leveraging connectivity and autonomy. So connectivity means you have more information than you otherwise do. Autonomy means get rid of the driver's right foot, is my simple way of thinking about it. So we have a number of demonstrations that we've done here, partnered with companies and so forth. The most illustrative demonstration is called eco-driving through signalized intersections. So the idea is as follows. If the intersections have connected to the traffic light controller some wireless communication, they can then transmit to the vehicles the signal phase and timing. That is, think of it as like a pedestrian crosswalk, where you have a pedestrian crosswalk and it gives you a countdown timer for how much longer you can pass through. So that, but wireless. And then the vehicle takes that information and then optimizes the speed trajectory to minimize energy consumption. This isn't rocket science. You know what the optimal solution is to minimize energy? Ride a bicycle. But if you insist on driving a car from point A to point B, essentially it's drive at constant speed, right? If you're going to do so in some minimum amount of time, it's just you have these traffic lights that unfortunately make it more difficult. So that's essentially the game. And then let's see, this is also a video too. Let me just pass this forward. So last year at the ARPA East Summit, they asked us to do a demo of this, where we had participants at the SlrpEV Summit in Washington, D.C. come and ride in the car. So they often have people bring tech demos, but we were the flagship demonstration because it was like Disneyland. People could get in the car and experience it. And what we have here is our vehicle that's driving in an automated fashion. And there's a virtual traffic light signal right up here. We couldn't bring a whole traffic light, of course, but you'll see the vehicle kind of pause. And then in the back seat, there was a virtual environment where the passenger could, see the virtual signal. And actually, there were other vehicles that are going around in this loop. So our students assembled this in like 3 weeks. They gave us a short period. They said, here's a bunch more money, just make it happen. 3 weeks, the car pauses and it goes. And then we want you to give several dozens of people, including government officials, rides in this thing so they could experience. UC students are amazing. So yeah, you can see a photo with, all the students, Jennifer Granholm. So that was pretty cool. Let me skip this and highlight this one. So this is a recent project from the UC Office of the President Climate Action Program. Some of you are probably familiar with this $100 million program that was stood up. So we partnered actually with Shin Fan Lin here at UC Davis. Any students at Shin Fan? No? Okay. And UC Merced and UC Santa Cruz. The question is, how do we evacuate communities in a world where there's 100% zero emission vehicles, where now the vehicle's fueling is much more coupled with a power infrastructure that could be more susceptible to outages in the event of an extreme event. So how do we think about evacuation planning? Could we do something about rethinking our infrastructure with some sort of backup generation or mobile power units? So we're right in the middle of this project. But today, I'm going to give some background motivation for what I talk about in detail, which is SlrpEV, and I'll talk about innovative charging infrastructure options, namely Robochargers and battery swapping. So let me just dive right in. And first, I want to give context for why we care about all this. Like, what is the problem that we're interested in?
Shinfan just typed that they are online.
Oh, they're online?
Yeah.
Okay, good. What's up, Shinfan? So 51 billion. There's one number you remember from this presentation, it's 51B, because that is the tons of greenhouse gas emissions that are emitted annually every single year. If we break that down into all these sectors, we can start to understand if the goal is to send us to zero or not net zero, we can gain sort of a sense of what are the areas that are most important. Actually manufacturing, how we make stuff like cement, iron, and steel. Look how large that is. We were talking about the importance of concrete before the seminar, right? So hugely influential for all the students in the room if you're thinking, still trying to identify research. The electricity sector, basically coal, to an extent natural gas, but getting rid of coal is important. Globally, transportation is only 16% globally. Okay. But if we moved into more developed economies like California, where California is contributing 0.42 billion tons of greenhouse gas emissions, so about 1% of the world's greenhouse gas emissions is from our state borders, within our state borders, okay? But in our developed economy, because transportation is about 40%, and you can see how that breaks down into passenger vehicles, heavy-duty aviation, et cetera. So this is why the state of California, in their policies, are being quite aggressive in trying to reduce the amount of greenhouse gas emissions in the transportation sector, because it is the biggest in the state. But I want to dive a little bit more detail in the different modes of transport to better understand the intensity of emissions. I really love this this figure that comes out of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, where here it's looking at different modes: road, rail, water, air. And the x-axis here, pay close attention, are grams of CO2 emitted per kilometer moved, okay? And then you see there's a blue and a yellow. The blue is modes that are moving people. The yellow is the modes that are moving goods, okay? So actually it's grams of CO2 per kilometer per person for the blue one, and then grams of CO2 per kilometer per ton of goods. And you can see the most intensive modes are, unsurprisingly, air, right? So decarbonizing one aircraft has orders of magnitude more impact than, a light duty vehicle. But I also want to emphasize heavy duty vehicles here are about 10 times more emissive, roughly, relative to light duty vehicles. So decarbonizing one of those has sort of 10 times the impact, if you will. We'll come back to that. All right. And I also want to talk about the duck curve. Anyone seen the duck curve before? Raise your hand. Probably half the audience, some that haven't. I love talking about the duck curve, so I'm glad to explain if you haven't seen it. The idea is this: you have 24 hours in a day, 12 a.m. to 12 a.m. And the vertical axis is the net electricity demand for the state of California. Net meaning total electricity demand minus renewables. In other words, this is a signal that thermal generators need to track. They need to follow. You need to ramp them up and down because renewables is taking care of the rest, and then you got to serve demand. It's as simple as that. Now, this duck curve, you can see what it was in 2012, and you see it says actual. This was basically a cartoon created in 2012 when the state of California was considering the goal of having 33% renewables in electricity generation by 2020. What year is it now? 2024, right? So it's a cartoon, right, in 2012, and really they were focused on this. Thermal generators will need to ramp up dramatically. For example, in this forecast of what might happen in 2020, thermal generators will need to ramp up 13,000 megawatts in 3 hours, for example. The thing is that coal and nuclear, for example, as baseload generators, they don't change their power output quickly at all. But somehow the lights are on today, the year is 2024. So how are we doing this? We have achieved the goal of 33% renewables. We even surpassed it. And this is how it was achieved. So this was taken from, this is actually April 2023. And you can see here that you have the duck curve, this is actual data. And in fact, this 3-hour ramp is worse than what was shown on the previous slide, 17,000 megawatts in 3 hours. Now, this supply is on the bottom, and it might be hard to see, but we have solar here, renewables, largely dominated by solar in green. And then when you have this thing that happens in the evening called sunset, because of this annoying thing about Earth rotating around the sun, so we don't have the big fusion generator in the sky 24/7. As that sets, you have these other resources, which are primarily natural gas. So I want to highlight that, right? That we've got this 3 hours net demand, which was largely served by natural gas. Let me actually get rid of those for a second. What happened between 2012 and now is the shale gas revolution. Natural gas is super cheap. We have much more natural gas, and that has been important to complement renewables, okay? Solar and natural gas are like PB&J for balancing the grid, right? Because natural gas can ramp up and down very quickly. But it's even more interesting than that. So it turns out that in springtime in California, we have net negative demand, which means that we're generating more zero emissions energy than we can consume. And you can see that here. So if this weren't curtailed, you would have like a nice kind of diurnal bump here, but you can see it's like shaved off. We're literally curtailing, like reducing the output of solar that we could otherwise generate because there's not enough demand in that moment, right? And here, we're basically exporting as much energy as possible and charging up batteries to the extent that they exist in California, and it's still not enough, right? In California, exporting energy is very rare. We are generally a net importer of energy, okay? Now, many of you are interested in transportation, so let's now throw electrifying the transportation industry or sector on top of this. Okay, so we have this ramp in the evening, and now we're going to say, okay, let's electrify all vehicles. But the problem is the natural behavior is you go somewhere for work, you come home, you plug in, and note the charging would start when this ramp is occurring. Literally like the worst time. It'll exacerbate the ramp, because of the natural behavior here. So the key idea is, okay, if we can get some sort of flexibility in how these are controlled, then we can help balance this out. And there's also an emissions impact here because it turns out that the evening is the time of day that is worse in terms of total emissions on the grid, right? So if you're going to charge the vehicle in terms of total emissions from electricity generation, the evening is the worst time. I felt a little bit bad because I charged up my EV and prepped to come here. I plugged it in at 8 p.m. and I was like, not the best time to charge my vehicle. If I had done it in the middle of the day yesterday, that would have been better in terms of average emissions on the grid, but there it is. Okay, so, behavior can help change this. And here's what I want people in California to do if possible, if I could control behavior. I want you to leave home with 30% charge in your EV. Anyone leave home with 30% charge in your phone? No? Yeah. Yeah, I do that too. I mean, you can charge at work, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Like, do you guys have plugs at your desk? Yeah, you got plugs at your desk, right? What if you had a plug for your car at work? And then you can then charge in this time where emissions are least. And then when you come home, you're at 90%. You don't need to plug in at home. By the way, maybe the workplace is, if it's your phone, the workplace is going to pay for it, right? Who pays for your charging your EV? We'll get to that in a moment. Okay, there's also some equity issues that I want to highlight here as we electrify transportation. So this is looking about equitable access to zero-emission vehicles by income. On the left side, we have a rough distribution of income, all households. The year's 2017, but it's representative even today. So basically, we've got a uniform distribution of household income here on the left. And then we have the distribution of households that own plug-in electric vehicles. And it skews towards, like, me, college educated, white, I own my own place. It's a condo. Actually, it's not a single family home, so I got those issues. But, it's how do we provide transportation electrification to the second 50%? It's not happening naturally. And part of that I really want to emphasize is getting charging infrastructure to people's homes is super difficult. So this comes from another study from one of the national labs that I think is absolutely incredible. So before explaining this, let me just ask you where you all live. There's a lot of students in the room. So where you live, if you have a car, or if you could have a car, do you know, is there an electric plug near where you park your car at home? Raise your hand if you have like some sort of electrical something. Like maybe you could get an electric. Okay, this is the perfect audience, right? Because in reality, it seems more than half of you can't really own an EV and charge at home easily, right? You don't have access to charging infrastructure. So probably because a lot of you are students, you may live in apartments and be renters. And what this graph is showing is basically the black as a proportion of the colored bar is those that have electrical access. And then the gray is like, okay, if you did some sort of upgrade of some sort, then maybe you could get access. So there's a huge amount of people that are left out that don't have the convenience, easy convenience of charging at home. So that really leads towards SlrpEV, Smart Learning Research Pilot for EV Charging Stations. This collaborative work with students Tang Zhang, Bertrand Trabaka, Sanjay Bai, listed here in order. Tuba Ozturk is right here, and then Hassan Obiad. So here's the goal, is we're trying to create the next generation of workplace and public charging infrastructure to address all those problems that I just talked about. We want to decrease emissions. We need this to be economic for the facility operator, and we want this to be affordable to the EV drivers. And the key thing to remember about this is, there are many EV charging pilots across the country, across the world. Why is this one different? This one is different because we're not just optimizing power, the charging schedule, but we're optimizing the price of EV charging service by learning their preferences. Okay, that's the key. So humans are in the loop, and I'll explain in more detail. So I think of this as a cyber, physical, and human system. Let me describe the cyber and physical components first. So physically, we have 8, level 2, so it's 6.6 kilowatt EV chargers, like similar power to the ones on the backside here. There's 8 of them that are in a garage on the UC Berkeley campus. And the cyber infrastructure, let me describe it by how a user experiences it. So you park here, you scan a QR code, and that opens a browser on your phone, and you log into our system. And when it logs into the system here, it queries our databases for prices that have been optimized or randomized, depending on what we're doing. And then you as the user consider which option do you want. There's two, and I'll explain what they mean in a moment. Don't concern yourself too much with the options just yet. So then you consider the option that you like. It then sends back the choice that you pick. Then in the cloud here, we're doing some optimization to manage the power flow and whatnot. And then it sends that down to the EV chargers. And then every 5 minutes, we get what we call like metrology data, telematics data of how much power is being delivered and whatnot. So here's some statistics so far. This has been running for a little over 3 years now, actually. So you can see some stats of how much energy, e-miles, the number of charging sessions. Those numbers are not impressive. You know why they're not impressive? Because the first year of this, we basically told everybody don't come to campus, right? Because of COVID and learn from home. So that was pretty tough. We opened it, November 2020. And we didn't come back to campus until fall 2021. Some of you remember that, right? And then usage kind of popped up. I think the most interesting stat is the number of unique users, actually, because then you have unique profiles of preference. You get a diversity of preferences. So I think that's actually the real good number here. Let me describe the human element, and that has to do with the choices. So here's the idea. We're going to offer people two choices of how they charge their vehicle in a way that we can realize this next generation of workplace charging. The first one is regular, and it's your normal charging experience, just like you charge your phone and your laptop, meaning, when you choose regular, then it charges at full power immediately until you top off or unplug, like any other device. Okay, so there's that one. Scheduled is the more interesting one. So with scheduled, we ask the users to tell us when do they plan to depart and how much energy do they need. Now we ask them that in terms of how much added miles of range, because kilowatt hours is not an intuitive unit for most people. Okay, so then we just calculate added range to kilowatt hours. So what's interesting about scheduled with respect to regular? In regular, basically it's an appliance and an uncontrollable load. They do not grant us the ability to basically shape how we deliver power. If they pick scheduled, then they essentially grant us some flexibility in how we deliver power, subject to ensuring that they get this much range added, 30 miles by 1 p.m. Okay, so there are constraints, and within those constraints, we deliver, right? So the fundamental question is like this. If I want to shift load, then how much should I discount the scheduled option to acquire flexibility? That's the fundamental question. It's just like Amazon shipping options, right? You've got like the lower cost Amazon shipping option and delivers a little later, but on an Amazon day, and they optimize logistics on their side. So they lose some revenue from you, but then they decrease their operating costs. So that's the idea here. I also want to emphasize, you may not always want to shift load. The goal isn't to get everybody to pick scheduled. Sometimes it's fine for them to pick regular because you just want to get them charged and out of there. Think of like operating a restaurant. You just want to turn over tables, get them charged, get them out of there, right? You might not necessarily want them there 4 hours if they only need 2 hours of charge. So, this needs to occur dynamically. Now, we came up with this whole concept and then got a bit of funding to build it. And then, I was very worried, like, are we really going to ask people to make this kind of difficult choice every single time they come to campus and plug in, regular and scheduled? And they're like, oh my God, how am I going to save like 25 cents an hour or something like that? Are they going to care? I was actually kind of shocked because a lot of people are engaging with this and they are paying very close attention to the prices. I don't know if that's because they're university community or whatnot, because we've only deployed here, but they are very engaging. But the key thing is to incorporate humans in the loop. And so now we need some behavior model to predict the probability that they pick a certain option. So for this, we started out using discrete choice models, which come from behavioral economics. In fact, Daniel McFadden, economics professor actually at Berkeley, won the Nobel Prize in 2000 for this idea. And it's diffused certainly into transportation engineering. And the way it works is as follows. Actually, it's exactly logistic regression and machine learning. And I think people who know discrete choice models know that. I think the machine learning people who know logistic regression, most of them have no clue that this is like, there's like a behavioral economics interpretation to this. So anyways, so here's how it works, is you got some utility, you define some utility for each choice alternative. So yeah, ASAP and flex is actually regular and scheduled. Sorry for the different terminology. So each charging choice has some utility, and because there's econometrics, everything, these linear models, they love these linear models. The key thing I want to highlight here, though, is that the utility of picking regular or scheduled is linear in attributes, and we decompose that into attributes we control versus attributes we can't control, meaning we control the price. So we can adjust the utility of regular schedule by controlling the price, but there's other attributes that dictate their preference that we can't control, like when they arrive, or do they have a charger at home, you know, and that's just another parameter here. So it turns out if you make some assumptions about the noise, the uncertainty here, then it turns out you can actually write this in a way where it gives you this logit model, which it turns out in machine learning, they call this softmax function, which is a very important mathematical object in machine learning, which gives you the probability of every single choice, where V now is the utility without the noise term of each option. So keep that in mind, because now there's some interesting optimization that happens. Is now we can minimize the expected costs for the facility. You know, we have revenue from charging service and the cost from electricity. And it turns out you get this mathematical form. I'm just going to show the structure and relegate the details to, you know, you can read the paper if you're really interested. So you get this nonlinear program. But the interesting thing is that the constraints are linear here. They're linear functions of your optimization variable. But then you get the subjective function, and it looks like an expectation, right? You sum over the outcomes of the random variable, the probability of each outcome, you know, times how that alternative affects the cost function here. The interesting thing is H sub j is biconvex in Z and U, your optimization rules. Why am I emphasizing this? First, biconvex means if you freeze one of those variables, it's convex in the other. Okay. And if it's, why do we care if it's convex? It means you can solve it efficiently to provable optimality if it's just convex. So the fact that we have this biconvexity is kind of interesting structure that we can exploit. And it turns out if we use the discrete choice model on the previous slide, then we can actually, effectively and efficiently reformulate this into a multi-convex problem. So I want to explain the details here, but there's a nice, you know, if you take a convex optimization course, there's some nice, it's like literally problem 7 in a problem set. That gives you the identity that you need. And then you can reformulate this and solve it very efficiently online. It's still a nonlinear program, so you can't say it's provably optimal, but you can find a solution very quickly. So if you use the right discrete choice models, you can exploit that. Let me go right to the results. Here's what ends up happening and what the user experiences. So here, we're actually trying to, you know, minimize net costs or maximize net profit. So leave this is actually the net cost what's described here. So you have the utility costs minus the service revenue. And what I want you to focus on is first the green curve. This is the time of use cost. This is what you pay the electric utility, which changes according to time of day. So you can see that the cost, which you pay the electric utility, the facility operator, is it's got this peak from 4 p.m. to 9 p.m., right? So basically avoid charging in the evening. By the way, that probably doesn't surprise you because you know we have this ramping in California, right? This ramping problem. So basically you're saying, okay, I want to avoid charging there. Meanwhile, you've got this, like they call it super off peak from 9 a.m. to about 2 p.m. So to the extent possible, put all the energy during that time period. And by the way, that actually coincides with lower total greenhouse gas emissions on the grid. Very nice. The two options that are optimized are regular in yellow and scheduled in blue. And what you can see here is that for much of the day, the price is the same. That's actually the first thing I want to say. Because for much of the day, given how long they stay, it doesn't really make a difference to shift their load. Like there's no benefit to shifting their load. They might not stay long enough. they might not need enough energy, and there isn't a change in the cost, okay? But what you do see is, I actually want to highlight the delta here in the morning, because this is when people are arriving. That's actually the really important one. As you can see, schedule gets discounted a bit. And it's just before the price drops at 9 a.m. because it understands, hey, if I can incentivize more people to pick scheduled, I can delay the start of their charging to 9 a.m. for those that are arriving before, okay? So intuitively, that's what it's doing, but the models are making it all happen. Right? I'm just kind of interpreting what they're giving us. So we learned all the behavior models, we deployed it, we got people to charge a SlrpEV, they made choices, and then empirically, this is what we found in terms of making it more economic, reducing emissions. You can see how it reduces the emissions kind of naturally by putting it in the middle of the day. So we've got the net revenue, that's kind of the highlight figure, the baseline versus optimized. So the net revenue is in blue here. And you can see that we actually make it more economic for the facility operator by reducing operating costs, even by helping people reduce their costs to charge by giving them discounts in the right moments. So we can increase the revenue by 50%. And actually, it's doing that in a couple of ways. It's doing that by increasing the gross revenue. So from the behavior model, we actually found you can increase the price on the average price of EV charging, and people will still use it. The baseline was $1.50 because that was the price, $1.50 per hour. That's the price to charge your EV at nearby EV charging stations. And we found that that's probably underpriced. From our behavior models, you can charge a bit more. So you have a little bit more gross revenue from that. But we also decrease the operating costs, you can see by shifting the load. And so this is how it's done, right? Is in the shaded bits, you see the super off peak in green, and then the peak period in red. And the baseline is in the red dashed line, and then our optimized total power or mean power is in blue. So you can see here, we're putting more load when we optimize into this green period. And you can see in blue here, see how it brings the average power to almost zero just before, because it's shifting that bit. Like that's the opportunity that it sees. And meanwhile, importantly, this peak period, you can see that the average power here is less compared to the baseline because we're disincentivizing charging during that period.
Quick question. For optimized version, do you optimize their choice for regular versus schedule, or you just optimize the pricing as a system operator?
We are optimizing the price of regular and scheduled, so literally like the dollars per hour. That's actually what Z represents here. And we're simultaneously optimizing the power, like in kilowatts that we're delivering to the vehicle.
Okay. So the users still make their individual choices.
Yeah, they still make their individual choice. And if they make the choice of, J indexes the choice. Yeah. So J is basically, either regular or scheduled. Yeah. There's actually a third option, which is leave. That's very important. Let me emphasize that for a second. If you don't consider them just picking none of the choices, then the optimal solution is to charge people infinity, right? Because they have no choice. They have to charge, right? And you make profit, and that's all good. So that's actually very curious and very difficult. I don't have a slide on this, but we can't observe leave. We can only observe people that come and actually start a charging session. That's how we get the data. But people who, for whatever reason, decide, I don't like the prices, we can't really see that. I mean, we can see people open the app. We track that. But we don't know exactly what they're doing, right? And they might just be checking it out or scoping out or whatnot. So that's an important piece too. So they make their choice, and given the choice that they make, we're trying to optimize the price to nudge them towards a certain choice. And we get nudged away from infinity by considering the idea that they do. Yeah.
Do you track their location while they're using the app? Like, could you use that to figure out whether they left? Like,
we don't, and I'm sure there's IRB issues with that. IRB protocol, we don't. Let me ask you back. If you track the location, what would you do with that?
Well, like if they open the app while they're at the location and they leave, or then they close the app, then make some assumption.
Yeah, good point.
I don't like when apps track my location, so I might be less likely to use the service.
Yeah. No, yeah, excellent question. You know, in surveying the users, the participants, I find actually a lot of them will like check out the price at home before they commute. They'll sort of see what it is that day at that time, and they'll kind of make their decision beforehand because they tend to be in a rush, right? So maybe when they're having their coffee or eating a little breakfast, they just check it. So that got me realizing that, you know, this discrete choice, we phrase it as like an instantaneous moment in time where they have no idea what they're going to do. We present information and then they make a decision on the spot, but that's oversimplified. So yeah, there isn't a clean way. You can see we took a step for sure to incorporate behavior, but it's not quite encompassing of the ways that they make decisions. Okay, I'm going to move on and talk about alternative ways to bring charging to vehicles with different forms of infrastructure. So I'll briefly talk about Robochargers. This collaborative work with Yizhu and Teng Zhang and Zaid Ali Bokis, who's at Total Energies that helps support this project. So why am I talking about Robochargers? Here's the thing I've realized with SlrpEV is that there's huge challenges with fixed infrastructure. First, people overstay, meaning, you know, they might plug in, start charging, but they stay parked there for many hours after they're done charging, thereby blocking the infrastructure for others, right? So that decreases utilization. The electrical infrastructure is really expensive. While I was driving here, I was listening to a podcast about transformers, distribution transformers, and like how there's a 2-year backlog, you know, so guys, if we want to build more charging stations right here, and we like a lot of charging stations where we need a new transformer, apparently we won't be able to even get it going until 2 years from now because of supply chain. So can we get around the need for that? You know, there's permitting, there's scalability. You know, here we've got this long line at a Tesla supercharger. So I thought, okay, we need to think about innovative ways. So we came up with this wild idea of a Robocharger. And the idea is this, is what if you had a charging station where there's mixed type, meaning you have both fixed chargers, that's what this icon represents, but also these Robochargers. And Robochargers conceptually means that the chargers aren't fixed to one parking spot, they can move to other parking spots. And don't yet concern yourself with a physical manifestation of this. Like, don't yet worry about what is this Wall-E-like thing that's moving back and forth. Let's just consider operationally, like, how might this work? Could this make sense? When would it make sense? And I'm not going to go through all the mathematics of the formulation. It's very interesting to formulate an optimization to try to optimize the behavior. I'll just show you a visualization of what an end result looks like. So what's shown here is, E made this really cool visualization. You have 3 fixed chargers, okay? And then when a vehicle comes, you can see a bar pop up and the green is it charging. Meanwhile, you have one Robocharger here, and then you can see that there are vehicles that pop in and out and the Robocharger pops back and forth to try to serve those. Okay, and then you can see those that finish. And importantly, we consider the idea of leave, of if the queue is too long, people don't want to wait, then they might just leave. That's actually important because we're concerned with a case where there's not enough supply of chargers and a lot more demand, right? Okay, and so here's another visualization, and the final frame of the last slide is here. Here we've got, you know, about 20 EVs that come in. And what's being shown here is the gray bars are the period of time that they're parked there. And then when they're charging, so when it's blue, it's a fixed charger, right? So you can see it's always connected. But the dots represent the moments in time where it actually provides charge. The orange one is more interesting because that's the Robocharger. And you can see that it's popping back and forth between the EVs. So I'm showing you kind of a similar visualization of the same use case. But just you know, transposed and looking at it by EV ID. So you can get an idea of how it pops around. Okay, that's a flavor, and I'll just tell you the high-level results of what we found. We found that, you know, when demand exceeds supply, it turns out a mix of fixed and Robochargers definitively reduces the total cost of ownership, even if the cost of a Robocharger is 3 times that of a fixed charger. because of its flexibility to serve, many more vehicles without having the vehicle to change the parking spot. And it reduces this particularly when there's severe overstay, right? Because here's the thing about charging. People care about atoms in space and less about electrons and wires, I find. They want to put their car in a space and not worry about it. And if they can get a charge on top of that, that's good. Yeah. So this is also somewhat trying to address that. And also, one big reason it reduces the total cost of ownership is when the total cost, the time of use price from the utility has these demand charges that depend on the peak. So you can use the flexibility of the Robochargers to reduce the peak. So ideas like that, and here are some videos and images of what this might look like in the end. I think this could have some impact, particularly when there's limited infrastructure and you need to serve a large amount of vehicles, maybe like events, things like that.
Yeah, well, based off of what you're talking about right now, what is the specific use case? Would it be at work charging? Because as we say, people are charging at work. They don't want to go out and move their car, especially if it's cold or hot.
Sacramento Kings games, maybe.
Yeah, okay.
Right, like, does it make sense to serve, maybe that's a bad example because there's 41 games in the center each year, but yeah, maybe when there's spiky attendance of like parking demand, where it doesn't make sense of, do you have to build enough infrastructure for that worst case day, which is relatively rare? So, and you can imagine, maybe there's multiple parking lots and these Robochargers could move from one parking lot to another to serve peak demand in those days. I think that's one use case.
And you brought up right before this saying, you found that people care much more about the space than the actual electrical wires and such themselves. So that means you're inferring that the individuals are not focused on a daily basis charging their vehicle. It's like, I just want to park it, and if I can get a charge, that's fine. So is that what you're really referring to?
Yeah, I make that comment tongue in cheek, representing people who own PEVs today.
Okay.
Which, but it'll be, of course, more severe as the second 50% adopt plug-in electric vehicles, and then it's not just convenience. Getting a charge is critical too. So that, but if people overstay, then there's kind of an equity issue where people can't access the infrastructure.
That's really good. Thank you.
Not exactly robots, but the Denver airport long-term parking and the former Lightning e-motors did have something where they had mobile charging stations and they would manually unplug them from people's cars and move them to places where spots were available. So you might want to look at that.
Yeah. I have heard of that. Kyle Connor.
Yes.
I think he's talked about that.
Yeah.
I see that. Yeah. Yeah. Ideas like that are really good, right? And I describe it as robo, but things around this area is what we need. The way you asked me to highlight challenges. So innovative solutions like that. If we can get rid of the human element, because of the cost concerns, that's a consideration as well. Let me move forward and go into battery swapping. Gil Tall's not here. I know this, he gets excited about this. But he'll watch the recording, so he'll get to enjoy it later. So battery swapping. So I want to focus on this, is I showed this carbon emissions intensity. And at least for road transport, the most emissive mode is heavy duty freight movement, right? If we can decarbonize, make zero emissions one of those, it has 10 times order of magnitude impact. Now, suppose I ask the question as simply as this: what is the fueling or powertrain option for heavy duty trucks that minimizes emissions? Okay, and I just say it that way, and I don't worry about the logistics of truck movement. So the answer is battery electric conclusively. Okay, so it's battery electric conclusively simply because of the energy conversion losses of creating hydrogen, even if we do so with green energy. So this actually was a figure from my colleague Nicolas Obrecht at Total, who looked at the carbon intensity of the electricity mix on grids. And you can see this is annotated with different countries in Europe. So actually the whole EU is about 200 grams of CO2 per kilowatt hour generated. France is super low carbon. Anyone know why France is super low carbon in electricity? Yeah, they're heavily nuclear. Germany is much higher, although, they started with the feed-in tariffs, they then had to rely on a lot of coal and gas. I think the worst European, it's not here, Poland is like, dominant in coal. Anyways, so here you basically just have the conversion of generation of electricity to charging the trucks. But if you have to go through electrolysis of taking electricity, cracking H2O into H2 and O2, right? And then you take that H2 and you put it through a fuel cell and you've got maybe like a 45%, 40%, 35% conversion efficiency. It always loses, okay? Now, I'm not trying to go super hard into hydrogen and convince you battery electric is the silver bullet, but what I'm trying to tell you is that from an emissions point of view, it's clear that makes sense. The issue is range, right? That's the obvious issue that you're probably saying. So let's look at range for a sec. Here is data which shows the daily driving distance, from some fleets in Europe in a day. So this is in kilometers, and you can see the histogram here. And importantly, you've got the CDF, the cumulative distribution function, in red. So it turns out that something like over 90% of daily range is 600 kilometers or less, right? So if you can serve that, you've covered 90% of the trips for these trucks. Now, let's consider the idea also that maybe you could swap the battery like once during a day. So what this is showing is, okay, if I don't do a battery swap during the day, then what percent can I decarbonize given the distance? Okay, they use the word autonomy. This is a language translation thing, right? And then if I do one swap per day, how much more of the trips can I cover? And if I do two swaps. So you can immediately see if I can get one swap in there, then I can decarbonize a much bigger chunk of the kilometers, vehicle kilometers traveled for these trucks. So that got us thinking, and I'm just going to show the concept and an idea of what results look like, that you have this battery swapping system, just a simple cartoon, where you got this facility and it can charge these batteries asynchronous from the trucks being out of service, right? So that's important. The trucks can move and then batteries can charge asynchronously and then be swapped in. But at the same time, you have this facility with a whole bunch of batteries in it, and it's basically a battery storage system, which can then provide services in electricity markets, right? We talked about the duck curve, the need to absorb energy and spring in the middle of the day. So you can sort of stack values, if you will. So how would you operate such a thing? Because now you're providing sort of like a fueling type of service, and then on the other side, you're participating in electricity markets. How would you operate all of this simultaneously? Could this make sense? Is there some scenario where it makes sense? So here's just an illustration of what it looks like. Here we've got the state of charge profile for these batteries, and these batteries are not linked with the given truck, right? They're independent. They're like, think of them as like AA batteries that are popping in and out of different trucks and in the swapping station. This is actually this is a bay inside the swapping station. So you've got this battery, which could charge up, and then a truck comes and it swaps a discharge one, and then it charges back up, and so on and so forth. Meanwhile, at the end of the day, you can see it actually might discharge these batteries because there's some value in discharging to address this ramp issue that we talked about in the duck curve. So you can get this profile like this, where you can buy and sell electricity in the market, while in addition, providing this swapping service. So just a flavor of some like OR style problems here that combine electricity markets and transportation. So I'll conclude here, transportation in California is 40% of greenhouse gas emissions. There's equity and access challenges that get us thinking about some really nice intellectual challenges of how can we come up with innovative ideas. SlrpEV is one. We show that you can increase revenue by incorporating behavior to try to get flexibility. And then there's other, ideas of charging infrastructure to help address, issues with decarbonizing transportation. I talked about Robochargers. I talked about battery swapping. We need a lot more of these innovative ideas that can help crack these difficult problems that I encourage you to think about. So with that, I'll stop. Happy to take questions.
I had a question about SlrpEV. When you had this pilot in place or you still have it in place, do you ever talk about well, does the customer ever see information about how to maximize the health of their battery? Like, for example, one reason I don't charge my phone overnight is because I don't want it to be sitting at 100%. So I know about batteries because I'm physics and electrical engineering background, but like that's not everyone. So, and you can imagine that like early EV adopters know a lot about batteries because they did a lot of research, but like maybe like the next quarter, not even bottom 50%, it's like 75% of 50% of the population isn't going to know.
Yeah, so let me repeat the question as I understood it is, do we do anything to provide information to the participants on how to charge and improve their battery health? Namely, don't charge up to 100%.
Yeah, or saying something like scheduled could be better for your battery health.
That's very interesting. The answer is we do not. We do not do anything in terms of informing them about their battery health. That's very interesting because if we did, that's maybe another signal that isn't strict price that might incentivize scheduled more. You know, in particular, they may not need to charge to 100%, right? And if that reduces the charging time, we can get a little more flexibility. That's a really brilliant idea. I'll tell you, you know, we've got 279 unique users. I can't tell you how many, I have all these anecdotes of people literally just bought an EV outlet last week and they don't have a way to charge it at home. And they're like, I know there's SlrpEV, and they go and they sign up and then they contact me and they can't they don't even know how to get the charger working, right? And to be fair, SlrpEV is a little more difficult to get working than normal because there's an app and, you know, it's not like a Tesla supercharger or anything. So it hits me that there's a big chunk of these users that are just new to this. And like, I think, how do we layer on information to them so they're not overloaded? Your idea is brilliant. I'd never thought about that. And I work a lot in batteries and now I'm embarrassed I have it. That's quite brilliant. Thank you. I got my money's worth coming. Back there.
Yeah, so for like overstay problems, has there been much consideration about like charging for just sitting in the spot like you would with a regular parking spot?
So yeah, that's actually, so it's hard to see here, but when they indicate the departure time at 1 p.m., we then also optimize the overstay price. So if they stay after 1:15, we give them a 15-minute buffer period, then it's $3 per hour, whereas before it's $1.50. So that's very important. There's no whiteboard in here. There should be a whiteboard. There's you know, the price per hour by hour is sort of like this. You know, you've got it for regular. Okay, that's the regular one. And then scheduled is something like this. Whoop, that's too extreme, but you get the idea. Right? There's a lower rate, but then if they pass that departure time, then it goes up. So that's how we can sort of incentivize it. People ask, why don't you charge per kilowatt hour? Because if they're plugged and they're not consuming any kilowatt hours, they get sort of for free, they're blocking the station. So there's opportunity costs of providing someone else service. That's crucial, actually, having this overstay fee. I've learned every way people will try to abuse the system. So you have to consider that when you design the prices. It goes beyond just like a nice PDF that reports your little model and your little simulations. Because your little simulated world doesn't abuse the system. Yeah, good question. Okay.
On a graph that you showed the optimal behavior and the baseline behavior, why there was a drop before the 9 a.m.?
Yes, because you're referring to this drop.
Yes, exactly.
So what it's doing is just before 9 a.m., you can see it here. Mm-hmm. It's incentivizing more people to pick scheduled, and they're reacting. They're picking scheduled, and when they pick scheduled, then our system doesn't start charging them, doesn't start charging their car until 9 a.m. Because it knows, hey, I can, at that very moment, not start charging the car yet. And then once it hits 9 a.m., then the price from the utility drops, and then I'll start charging. And it knows it can do that because it can still provide the amount of charge they need by their indicated departure time. So honestly, this should be surprising because it means people are reacting. This is like the most illustrative way I can show you maybe that people are like, oh, they're actually reacting to this delta in price amazingly.
So the peak before that drop, it's because they are still at the, for example, the charging station from the overnight.
You know what this is I think this is a little anecdotal and specific. So we have one power user that's charged. How many charging sessions do we have? Like almost 500 of these are one person who has a Prius Prime plug-in.
Oh, okay.
And she arrives at like 5:30 and finishes at like 8.
Oh, okay.
You know, and that's all she needs. And so basically that's all her. And she doesn't need to, you know, because she doesn't need to charge, so the optimize doesn't make sense. If she picks regular schedule, it'll do the same.
Oh.
So this is I think it's just anecdotal, a particular power user who happens to come in. Yeah.
So this is all very interesting. The fundamental thing that powers all of these is the arbitrage opportunity presented by the duck curve, right? And because that's there, you can sort of pay for all of these, invest capital now to get operational savings later type things. But those obviously compete against each other for that arbitrage opportunity. And now we live in a high interest rate environment. I was wondering what your thoughts are on both the saturation and interest rate effects on whether or not these things are viable.
Oh man, you gave me like a whole macroeconomics question. You know, so the first thing I'll say is, so here I'm fussing with shifting a little bit of power, you know, across the, you know, doing arbitrage, right? Like you're saying, between before 9 a.m. and after 9 a.m. You know, it's not dramatic, right? Just getting people to charge at work is already putting the bulk of power in the middle of the day. You're mentioning the duck curve. Just getting them to charge in the middle of the day, right, is getting them to charge at a time where the total emissions in the grid is least. So honestly, I think the bigger impact part is just options that allow people to charge in the middle of the day, where they are, right? And to the extent that you can use optimization and arbitrage to sort of optimize the microeconomics around that, then that helps. So yeah, I think, you know, we need options that allow people to charge in the middle of the day. That's, I think, the key thing. And since you mentioned high interest rates and all that, I think that does tie with, you know, some other options. Some of these may be capital intensive. Some of these may be in ways less capital intensive. We need other alternatives that have different risk profiles around them if you're trying to do, you know, raising finance, you know, for infrastructure problems. Like this is almost more of like a consumer electronics appliance type of solution as opposed to like an installed infrastructure solution. Yeah, I hope I somewhat addressed your question.
Yeah, thank you.
Cool.
Hi, thank you for this interesting presentation. Also have a question about the objective function in that program. You say it's to maximize revenue or profit, or I don't know. But that doesn't make sense to be something like more directly connected to welfare, like maybe maximize the kilowatts delivered or something like that, or the amount of client or something like that. And would you think that would change the results?
Yeah, excellent question. Maybe this is best shown here. There's a bunch of errors here, excuse me. So you're pointing out we're optimizing from the perspective of the facility operator, or we're optimizing from the perspective of the facility operator owner, right? And you're asking the question, what about social welfare? What about for the user? What about for emissions? This is illustrative. We've done it for minimizing emissions. We've done it incorporating both the facility operator owner plus the user. So you can swap those in and out, and the nature of the solution certainly is different. I'll tell you, to be totally honest, one of the funders sees themselves, this project sees themselves as like a facility operator owner perspective. So they were pretty keen to do the physical experiments with this being optimized. So that's why we illustrated that. But you make a great point, right? There's no reason you couldn't consider a different objective function here.
I could be wrong, but I thought the dump curve is based partially on the fact that people are leaving their homes to go to work. And so does that change if people start working from home more?
Mhm. You know, interestingly, yeah, there are some interesting studies on how the duck curve changed during the work from home period. The duck curve mostly remained, and the key issue is even with people working from home, California is deploying just a lot more solar, which is just making the belly of this curve, bigger and bigger and bigger. So I think this will definitely persist, right? If California has tons of offshore wind and we figure out how to do floating offshore, because the Pacific Ocean seafloor drops off super quick as you go off from the coast, maybe that'll kind of flatten this a bit, or maybe there's other options, but with the solar dominated generation mix, I think this evening ramp will persist. Now, another thing you should be thinking is that, well, this is California specific. So the particular motivations I'm giving here in the solutions are very California specific. You go to a different region, this ramping might not be the problem that they're facing. There might be other things. Nevertheless, maybe you can appreciate though that with what I'm talking about, it brings flexibility. And so depending on what is the situation in that local region, you can consider like, okay, what are the challenges and can flexibility assist? Great question.
For your battery swapping you talked about, like how many batteries per truck do you estimate would be typical? Like, they obviously cost a lot. They require a lot of raw materials.
Yeah, I actually didn't put in the one key slide here that is illustrative of that. Let me just sort of put this one up so we can look at it as we talk. Yeah, we've done some sensitivity analyses on how much kilowatt hours of batteries do you need to serve a fleet versus if it's, fixed batteries within the truck itself. And we found that for long haul fleets, total kilowatt hours of batteries that you need is similar, or it might be bigger. It's similar or more when you have battery swapping. In other words, you will need to produce more batteries potentially, or the same, right? That's roughly what we're seeing. So it doesn't seem to do a whole lot in terms of reducing the amount of batteries we need to manufacture and like critical materials we need to mine and all of that. But there's another key factor that I really should have put up because it's a big talking point is if the goal with heavy duty trucks is moving goods over distance quickly, ton miles per hour, like tons of goods times miles per hour, then battery swapping completely beats fixed chargers. Because with fixed chargers, obviously you have to stop moving, right, and charge. And over long distances, that really builds up. And so that's where battery swapping, I think, has a ton of value. It's for long haul trucking. So and let me say this another way, is if we try to decarbonize long haul trucking, are we going to choke our supply chain by not allowing goods to move as quickly? And it seems with battery swapping, we can solve that problem. But it might not solve the problem of how much batteries we need. Hope I answered your question.
I just have a follow-up question though. So I understand what you're saying for long haul, because if you have to carry a huge battery to get through the day, like you might need more kilowatt hours. But do you know where that crossover point is? Because for short haul, it doesn't really add up to me. Do you know where that point is? It obviously depends.
Yeah, there's a nice paper by Venkat Vishwanathan and his student and postdoc kind of right-hand guy named Shripad in ACS Letters that has a really nice breakdown of your question. And they frame it as if we electrify semi-trucks, how much energy density do we need from our batteries and how many miles can they serve? And they talk about issues related to the crossover point you're asking about. I suggest I think that paper has a real complete answer to your question.
Thanks.
Do we have questions from online?
We do. We have a couple. So the first one is,
why is the price in cost per hour, not cost in kilowatt, kW?
Yeah. We did briefly discuss it. So if the price were given in dollars per kilowatt hour, the issue is, and just dollars per kilowatt hour, the issue is people would abuse it. Namely, there's this abuse problem where people could plug in, maybe start a charging session, maybe immediately stop from their car, they could stop the charging, and then they basically are getting that parking spot and they're blocking the charging session. So in fact, there's two types of values actually here. There's a value for the electricity we deliver, and then there's a value to just the time at which they have access to the infrastructure. And those are two different things. So we collapsed all that into a dollars per hour. Actually, in our models, we have ways where we break that out. But the main concern is if we only gave it to them in dollars per kilowatt hour, then abuse will happen. There's a lot of discussion on the best way to price EV charging. And I think for like level 2 charging that we're talking about here, it's kind of a different thing than say DC fast charging. I wouldn't extend my conclusion immediately there, but that's the main reason. Yeah.
Are there other questions?
There are lots of.
Okay.
So
I'll
this
be
next
quicker.
question, if we already answered, just let me know, we can skip it, but it's, since many people who are parking away from home are in the location for a particular event, class, meeting, etc., leaving the event to move their car may not be practical. How can
Totally.
this be addressed?
That's a huge issue. Excellent point. I hear this all the time from the participants. Yeah, moving their car is a pain. So if they pick scheduled and they say, well, I only need, to charge until 12, can I feasibly go out there and move the car? That's absolutely a challenge. And I think that's why schedule becomes interesting because, if they can park there for a longer period of time, and we can offer them a discounted price, but then we can use their, we refer to as slack, like the amount of slack there is and shift their charging, then we can allow them to, stay a bit longer. But that issue also motivated Robochargers. That's why I was interested in, can they stay in that parking spot and the charger move? Yeah, maybe we'll take a few more from the chat.
Awesome. So this one's seems more like a comment, but it seems that all of these calculations and behavior management are made much more difficult because of the continued assumption of private ownership of vehicles. If a shared electric autonomous transportation network is implemented, vehicles just go out of service to charge when necessary and move away from the charger when finished. Nobody's worried about their parking space. You can just replace the cab of a long-haul truck with a charged cab when the current charge is consumed, etc.
Agreed.
Great. Okay. Next question is, how should charging infrastructure be balanced with efforts to reduce excess parking to facilitate more transit, walking, and bicycle?
You would expect this sort of a question to come into Davis.
Of course, yeah. No, I'll say, yeah. If we allow people to carpool, ride their bike, and there's more multimodal options, we don't have to worry about this. I 100% recognize that. I built this charging station on campus. I myself bought an EV. I can't charge at home. And you know what I do every day? I ride my bike because that's clearly a better solution. So I totally agree. Yeah, absolutely. A lot of great people at UC Davis are working on making more multimodal solutions possible. I certainly don't see this as a silver bullet. To the extent that people do need to drive, especially if, say in the Bay Area, housing prices are high, and if they have to live further away and there isn't good public transit, it's difficult. They might be relegated to cars. So we do need to find solutions there. But I agree with the spirit of the question.
Yeah, but as what you earlier emphasized, for most challenging problems, we need a portfolio of different solutions and putting them together, and what you contributed here, even in a multimodal setting, would still be part of the solution, right? So, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, they are not conflicting with each other. They're just complementary.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And I also really appreciate that in the setting that you shared with us, the vision that you shared with us, there are new opportunities for business model, right? There's
Right.
new business models that rarely come into public infrastructure world. It used to be considered as the public sector takes care of all the infrastructure. But I think with these different possible solutions, innovative solutions, that individual or small business could actually come here and be part of the solutions and make their revenues for their own benefit.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for that.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, and you can imagine for some of the people in this room or listening online, you can imagine, whoa, startups can form around this, right? And there's a lot of opportunity to create new small businesses. Yeah, great time of opportunity. More in chat.
We have one more.
Okay.
How should battery swapping for heavy truck goods movement be balanced with rail transport?
Oh, yeah. It's, yeah, rail, we haven't looked at that specific question. So I can't say anything intelligent. I'll say that, yeah, rail transport, electrifying rail, it would seem to me that that could be superior in a lot of respects. The key issue is building out the rail infrastructure. Say here to California, the biggest rail line we have coming from the rest of the country goes from like Las Vegas, and it goes along that highway that connects Las Vegas to like Mojave, goes over to Tehachapi into Bakersfield. There's a huge rail line there. That's like the only one that kind of feeds the rest of the country into California, for example. So if we can build out that infrastructure, I think that'll help a lot with decarbonization. But in California, it seems we're quite dependent on road transport. So that's a great question. Someone should look into that. And if there are $10 billion of money to spend, a huge chunk of it, I imagine, should go to rail, maybe some of it to swap it.
That's the last question from the chat so far.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. There's one question? Okay, yeah.
Okay, imagine a situation that the departure time and the time that you have for charging is much higher than the range that you need for during those charging and charger vehicles. I was wondering, what do you think about using this vehicle to charge the other vehicle instead of charging him, for example, $2 per hour because it stays there more than needed?
Yeah, and I've seen that idea proposed. The idea being, if I can repeat, that other vehicles could charge other vehicles, right? And then that creates more charging points, so to speak. You might, overcharge a vehicle if it's convenient, so they make a little revenue, charging someone else. I've seen that proposed a lot. I think it's an interesting idea. We wanted to actually do not just R&D in PDF and publication, but like actual deployment. And I'd even say it's not just demonstrations deployment, because this has been operating for 3 years and people are paying their own money. So we were focused on doing something we could actually take it all the way to deployment. I think there's a lot of, probably be a lot of challenges if you want to demonstrate and deploy that sort of idea. Yeah, maybe I'll just stop there. I think it's interesting to consider. It's in the spirit of what I'm trying to encourage, which is like innovative ideas.
Your talk certainly inspired so many questions, right? These
Right.
are very, very vivid participation. Thank you so much. Let's thank our speaker one more time.